Brandt. We're here at the Learning Center at Jupiter Hills. We're going to talk briefly about loft and lie angles. Whenever I'm fitting for irons or fitting for wedges, one of the most important things that we can do is fit for the lie angle. Okay, the lie angle is how this club sets on the ground when you hold it in your hands, and more importantly, how this thing interacts with the turf when you hit a ball. Some people will dig a little bit more towards the toe on their irons, and some people like to dig a little bit more heel biased. As a result, we bend the lie angle of this club to help match your profile and your style of how you move the club to the dirt. For clubs that are getting too upright, that's where the toe starts getting a little bit high in the air. That's when we make it upright. And when we flatten the club, that's where we bring the toe down. So whenever we do fittings, we monitor what the club does through the turf and make sure that we're matching it correctly to you. So what we're going to do today is show you the severity between a club that's too upright, a club that's too flat, and a standard club. So in a moment, I'm going to have Tanner hit a couple of shots with a standard lie angle with an AP37 iron, and we're going to see what his shot shape does, and then we're going to compare it along the way to different settings for different irons. If we look at TrackMan here, we can see Tanner's numbers of the two swings that he took, and they're fairly similar because of how consistent he is. If I look at the carry yardage for both of these, the first one was 183 in the air, and the second one was 185 in the air. More importantly, let's go to the first one. If I look at the launch direction, this is the direction that the ball launched in relation to its target line. So if we look at this little trace right here, it's starting extremely well on its intended target line. So that tells me that Tanner is starting the ball fairly closely on his target line. And if we look at spin axis defines how much curvature and in which direction the ball is going to try and turn. Anything that's negative, if the spin axis is negative, that means that if my ball is here horizontal, that would be 0. Well, it's tilting the spin axis, tilting the ball by 7 degrees to the left because it's negative, which means it's going to fall left and make a draw. So anything that's negative will always turn left and spin left, which produces a draw. Just as likely, if I have anything that's positive, that will produce a cut. So whenever we're looking at this, I'm looking at the starting direction with a standard lie angle, and I want to look at the spin axis to make sure it's not getting too severe, and we like it around these numbers. These are pretty good right here. So this tells me that so far, Tanner's lie angle with a standard lie is pretty accurate for him, but we might have to adjust it a little bit later. But we'll keep going. This is the iron that Tanner was using, and we put this tape here on the sole of it so that whenever he hits the ground, it makes a little bit of a mark here. And this tells us if it's taking toe biased, heel biased, or if ever it's hitting in the middle. You can tell on both of those swings that Tanner hit fairly close to the middle. You can see this bigger black smudge here being towards the middle of the sole, which tells me that it's bottoming out on the turf fairly flush and evenly on both sides. So that means that his lie angle is pretty accurate right around standard. So now I just went to the back and I just bent this 4 degrees upright. So a standard lie of an AP37 iron is 63 degrees. So this angle right here on standard is 63 degrees. I have this one now at 67 degrees, which means I bent the toe upwards 4 degrees, making this angle more acute. So we're going to give this to Tanner. He's going to take two very similar swings, and we're going to see what happens. Okay, if we go back to TrackMan here, we'll see these next two shots that Tanner hit with an iron that was 4 degrees upright. We can already see that the starting direction, the launch direction of the ball has now gone negative, which means the ball is starting left of its target line. That's simply because for Tanner, an upright club is not the greatest fit because of the starting direction. Now you can see the spin axis is still negative, which means he's still applying a draw to the shape of the shot. However, what also do we notice is that his carry distance has gone down. So because this ball is starting left, it's also starting lower because of the upright club, and because it is continuing to draw, it is falling out of the air too much. So the ball is being tilted too much and falling out too soon and not staying in the air. We look at the ones he hit with a standard lie angle, starting direction was to the right, and the ball was much higher, staying in the air at 185. And with a very upright club for Tanner, the ball started left, went left, and only went 178. He took another one for us that was a little bit better contact, but very similar results. Is that this one being one of his better ones at 182.7 with a 4-degree upright club, you can see the starting direction, the launch direction is -1.2, and he's also hitting a draw. So not only is this ball turning left, it's starting left of its target line. And if we know anything on the golf course here at the Hills, is that long and left can be pretty dangerous on some of these greens. So let's take a look at Tanner's iron here with the tape on it. See if I can get the reflection out of the way here. See, the smudge mark is much more towards the heel. That's because the toe is higher in the air, which exposes the heel more on a club that is too upright for somebody. So whenever I look at the wear mark, whenever he bottoms out on the ground, you see that's towards the heel, which tells us that this thing is way too upright for Tanner. Not to mention, the data we had on TrackMan validated that the ball was starting left of target. So now for our final 2 shots that Tanner's gonna hit for us, I've taken this club and I've bent this 4 degrees flatter of standard. So standard lie angle was 63 degrees. We second put it 4 degrees upright to 67. Now we took it 4 degrees below standard, which is gonna be 59 on a lie angle. So again, that's 4 degrees flat off of standard. So we're gonna let Tanner hit 2 more shots and we'll see the results and we'll see the data. Okay, if we return to TrackMan one last time here, we'll see what happens with a 7-iron that is 4 degrees flat of standard, which is effectively 59 degrees of a lie angle for Tanner's 7-iron. We can see immediately what happens because that toe is so much lower than the heel. For Tanner, and it being extremely flat, you can see how much more to the right the ball is starting of the target line. And we can see the shot shape here, how it immediately starts right because the iron is too flat for Tanner. We can also see, which is unusual for his shot shape, he typically plays a draw, but because it is so flat and it's starting so far to the right, he has successfully made a positive spin axis. What that means is that now this shot shape will produce more of a cut or more of a fade. So whenever we're fitting people, we're constantly monitoring the starting direction and the overall shot shape, and we want to make it as straight as possible. So sometimes we tinker with the lie angle a little bit to see what we can do to produce the straightest ball flight that's going to stay in the air the longest. Now we saw with the one earlier that tilted to the left and started left and fell out of the air pretty quickly, wasn't nearly as far as some of the straighter ones. The same thing happened with this guy here, is that when we make it 4 degrees flat, that you can see he's not maximizing his distance. That his distance has actually gone down because it's starting right and falling too far to the right. And as far as this one was only 177. If I revisit the ones that were a standard lie angle, you can see how much tighter the launch direction is, and despite a spin axis of -7, he's still keeping it in the air for 183, and then his next one here, starting right of target, drawing back to the left, and keeping it in the air for 185. If we look at this last iron that Tanner just hit, the one that we made 4 degrees flat, you can immediately see the wear marks on the toe, because the toe is so low in relation to the heel here that Tanner is digging the toe more often than none because his iron is too flat and the ball is starting too far out to the right. So we constantly monitor these wear marks on the bottom of the sole when we put this tape on here to see where it's interacting with the turf. And that gives us the pure indication to know that we should shift it more towards the middle, making it a little bit more upright. So through all that testing, we eventually found that Tanner's appropriate lie angle for an AP37 iron should be standard. That means that the ball is going to be its straightest ball flight, starting on a good line, on its good target line, and staying in the air the most. So whenever we do fittings with people, we constantly monitor these things to make sure that everything is correct. So we would encourage you to come out to the Learning Center and take advantage of that service to where we can see and make sure that your clubs are right for you. If you've gotten a fitting through us, then we made sure that they were correct and that they're spot on. However, as our swings change and we start developing new tendencies and new habits throughout our golf game, these things can change sometimes, so it's a constant maintenance that we have to pay attention to make sure that not only that our equipment is right for us, but that the adjustments and specifications of the equipment is correct as well. If you have any other questions, you come out here to the Learning Center. We're always happy to help, and we're always happy to dial in your equipment to make your game a little bit better. Thank you.